Hi, everybody. My name is Amid, and I am the publisher of Cartoon Brew. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight. I'm going to introduce two people on stage. They are the directors of the film. One of them has been nominated for 7 Oscars and has won 4 Oscars and has been nominated for 12 BAFTA awards and has won 6 BAFTAs. And the other person is making his feature directorial debut with this film, but he's a 30-year veteran of Aardman Animations. He's the creative director of Wallace and Gromit and the animation director of Early Man. So please give a big round of applause for Nick Park and Merlin Crossingham. And they have a couple special guests with them too that they're bringing up. So next to me is Nick Park and Merlin on the far
Good evening.
end there.
Hi.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
You know, you guys have been doing a lot of press for this film, and I'm sure you guys have been asked a lot of questions that are kind of the same questions over and over. I'm curious, just to start off, are there any topics that you haven't been asked about that you wonder why people haven't asked you about this yet? Like, is there anything that any question that's been posed to you so far that or are there questions that haven't been posed to you so far that you're wondering like you wish somebody would ask that? Or is everybody pretty much asked everything?
We've been pretty well covered, haven't we, by the questions? I mean, we don't get asked things like how much tea did the crew consume over 15 months of production, which was probably quite a lot, and I don't know the answer, so I'm glad I'm not asked that.
One young child first question was, "What's your favorite dinosaur?" I was able to answer it.
Has anyone asked you about? I read that you drive a motorcycle to work every day.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that people ask you about that?
No, but you know, I ride a motorcycle now. I used to ride a bicycle. Sometimes I used to ride a unicycle or roller skates. You know, so I like different forms of transport. Yeah.
In this film, I noticed Gromit, and I'm going totally off topic here, but I noticed Gromit actually rides a motorcycle in the film. I don't think he rode it. I could be wrong. In Close Shave, is this the first time he kind of takes command and drives, or has he driven a motorcycle before in the other projects?
He may have. Did he in one of those other?
Oh, I think he might have in a small commercial, but never in one of the headline films.
Yeah.
This is the first time that he's had to commandeer the motorcycle.
Was
'Cause
that
normally
related-
Wallace
was that
is
related
motorcycle.
to you? Was that something you wanted in there, or because
Uh,
of your own interest? Or
well, it it was actually a moment of where the reason that Gromit went on the motorbike was to sort of mark the moment of him sort of making a decision to go and do something, and it was resurrecting a sort of
Because the van wasn't working,
because the van wasn't working.
and the gnomes had stolen
Yeah,
wheels and
yeah,
hidden.
yeah.
So he resurrected the bike.
Yeah, that's right. So it was sort of a character. The motorbike sort of has a character that is quite symbolic from A Close Shave, and a lot of people a lot of fans actually love the motorbike and sidecar, and there's actually been several people who've made sort of duplicates, aren't there, like real life ones.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and actually fitting Gromit on the motorbike is quite tricky because it was designed for Wallace to drive. So he kind of does fit, but it's like one of those Easy Rider Harley things. He doesn't quite fit, and so to make him sort of look comfortable on the motorbike was quite tricky. But yeah, we got there in the end.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question about Feathers McGraw. So what took so long to bring this character back? Because this was it's one of the most iconic characters from the Wallace and Gromit world. It was my introduction to it. Wrong Trousers for a lot of people was their introduction into that universe. But you held back. You haven't introduced him in 30 some odd years. Was there a specific reason that you held back, or what was the impetus for saying now is the time to bring Feathers back?
Well, a few people had mentioned it over the years. Would he ever come back? And there'd never been a real reason, like a real context to do that. And we've never been in the habit of bringing characters back in the Wallace and Gromit films until now, with PC Macintosh as well, the policeman. And it was really, in this idea, it was quite a late breaking idea, really, wasn't it? The idea started. We started to develop it as a back in the days of Weir Rabbit, after Weir Rabbit, just this idea of Wallace inventing a robot gnome to help Gromit in the garden with his gardening chores, and that was funny. There's lots of fun in that. Um, and but there was a lack of a motive. What if the usual story of the invention goes wrong, but why? And it needed something more personal and motivated. And Feathers was like, the obvious thing, like just shining off the shelf. Like, it seemed obvious suddenly, and the perfect solution to that issue, rather than setting out to do a sequel with, to the wrong trousers. It was a solution to many different story issues. So, yeah.
It's quite a big thing as well to bring a character like Feathers back. And for quite a while we weren't, it's weren't sure if it was the right thing to do even until and but now it feels like the film couldn't exist without him. So it certainly was the right thing.
Or he's the thing. Yeah, he's the
Absolutely.
perfect vehicle
Um,
for that story.
and when the first thing that really dropped from the film, aside from the announcement that we were making the film, was Feathers is back. And I remember both Nick and I were quite unsure, a bit nervous about that being the thing that we led with, um, because it was kind of monumental
And the
for
wrong
us.
trousers were so loved and
That's right.
held up. Yeah,
That's right.
we didn't want to spoil that
But
thing.
yeah, but now with sort of the instant feedback you get from social media and sort of uh, fans being so very vocal in that arena, the response to Feathers was so overwhelmingly positive and like ranging from "Oh my god, I was scared stiff of him, my kid," or "He's the best villain ever," or and whatever the response was. It was generally, well, in fact, I think it was completely 100%
Mm.
like, "Oh my god, that's amazing." Um, and at that point, we kind of thought, "Okay, so we've done the right thing, and it's going to be okay." But it really it was nerve wracking. It's a big deal.
It, now, Merlin, I mean, you've done a lot of animation with these characters over the years. When you have a character that doesn't have dialogue, is that something that an animator, like for stop motion, looks forward to? Like if you get a shot with Feathers, you're like, oh yeah, I don't have to worry about the
Well, yeah,
mouth. Is
yeah,
that
absolutely. I mean, it it is the hardest thing. A character with dialogue kind of gives you a lot to work with. Shots with Gromit usually grow by about 20 to 50% from the story reel, because the performance requires that. So we do allow for that growth. But Gromit has got an eyebrow. When he's stood up, he's got pretty human body language, so you can really make him perform in a physical way. Feathers, however, doesn't. He moves his head. His feet sort of are not art. He doesn't have knees. They just do that, and he glides. Um, and uh, it, we would debate about the blinks. Should he blink? Should it be once? Should it be twice? Should it be none? Because like good scary characters that kind of have that stare, the control, and we we had a handful of animators. We had 35 animators when we were at full speed, and I'd say probably we only really entrusted 4 of them properly with Feathers, big sequences.
Well, only 4 would volunteer, really.
Yeah, yeah, but, and
We're scared.
I was scared of him, because a animators are sort of put on the planet to make things move, and actually we were very much trying to hold our nerve as directors and to hold him back and to ask the animators just to do as little as possible to get as much out of him as possible. And because you see him there, that's the size. These are the actual puppets from the film.
Are the actual.
So he's tiny, And because he doesn't really move in a traditional sort of anthropomorphic way, you have to use every trick in the book as a director. And so the sequences with feathers in, I think I'm right in saying for you as well as for me, Nick, they are the hardest sequences in the film, bar none. And you have to use the lighting, the music, the camera move, and the composition, and the way the performance all come together to make him work as a character. Even the lighting, so that he's got glass bead eyes, and if you don't get a highlight in the eyes, his expression or his presence dies. So the director of photography and the team, uh, the lighting team, always, even if there wasn't supposed to be a light there, had one, so when he turned, there was a highlight in his eyes. So all those little things are part of his performance. Whereas other characters, you can get away with you can get away with loads with the others, but there's nowhere to hide with that guy.
Yeah, one of the things I love is just how threatening he is when he does like just a slight turn,
Yeah.
and that can be so scary when he just turns around. I mean, there's a threat there.
It's all about the timing.
It's the timing and the lack of motion.
And holding him back. So when he does move, you see it, and it means something.
Building on this idea of performances, I was reading that you guys have a process there that you call laving or laving. I don't know how you pronounce.
Live action video, basically.
Is that okay?
System in house.
And so is it just you shoot performance reference, or take us through what that process is of how you
Yeah.
come up with the performances before you give it to the animator?
Yeah, well, it is our way of, as directors, conveying what's in our heads, because the animator wants to know what the shot is about, what the scene is about, what we need from the character. So when we get in front of the video camera and start working it out, and it's almost like an acting workshop, really.
Yeah, like a rehearsal.
Sometimes the storyboards don't always show everything exactly, or we find out that something actually isn't working when we start to act it out. And it's not so that we want the animator to copy the video and get it realistic. It's more that it gives us something to talk about, and so we can talk about the comedy and how it lands and the timing and so forth. Yeah.
And just to add to that, that it's not unusual in animation to do video reference, but specifically in stop motion, you can't iterate your shot. You can't perfect it and go back and do it again. So when the animator uh, gets on set, we will do a block through, and that's not only for performance, it could be for lighting to hit focus marks, whatever. But we'll give notes, and when the animator actually closes the curtain on the shooting unit and starts animating, that's the shot we're going to get, and our reshoot rate is about 1%. So we really have to have a very good reason to reshoot. So anything we can do to mitigate things going astray is something we'll embrace, and the live action video is by far and away the sort of strongest tool in that.
So in CG animation, it's oftentimes the animators who are shooting the reference video, but in this case, if I understand it, it's you, the directors, who are shooting the video, correct? Or are there
Yeah.
animators?
Yeah, so the animator's always the animator who'll be doing the shot is always in there with us, and because it's really important, they're the ones who are going to be doing it, and so it's really important that they are part of the discussion. And some of them will get in front of the camera, some of them won't, but especially because on a sequence, it's often not just one animator. We become the sort of the iron thread of the performance for that sequence or for those characters in that moment. And I think that's, from our point of view, really important, to sort of marshal the performance where we want it to go.
So somewhere like there's video of both of you as like feathers and
You could make the whole
grommet.
film. Yeah, I mean, it would be awful, but you could make the whole film with us doing the sequence.
Have you ever thought putting that out, or?
Yeah.
Well,
No.
sometimes we have props made which make it kind of funny as well. Like we had to get a nun costume in for some of it to act out the part of Feathers McGraw, which was quite good fun. Yeah.
That's never going to be on the extras.
Well, no,
Right.
I think in some of the making ofs, they kind of do like a split screen of the storyboard and the live action video, and maybe the block through, and then the final shot. That kind of thing is out there. So yeah, it's kind of amusing to see. It kind of explains our process a bit.
So Merlin, you've been at the studio for a very long time, but this is your, I believe, first time directing a feature there. How did that come about? And how did you feel you were ready? I'm sure you felt you were ready for a long time, but how did the whole process come about of you moving from creative directing the property to directing alongside Nick?
I guess it's that part of that process is that as creative director, it allows Nick to delegate creative responsibilities as and when he needs it. And um, Nick and I have worked on various different things for best part of 30 years. So I started working as an animator for Nick and then directing, and so our sort of creative working relationship has matured over those years. And when Nick was launching this film, he said, "How about it?" And so, I mean, it's his fault. And I think you can always think you're ready to direct a feature film, but the reality of directing one is very different to anything, even a half hour. It's nothing like just twice or three times the work. It's all encompassing, and you got to be careful what you wish for. I have loved making this film, but it's taken every ounce of energy I've had. I've sacrificed everything, social life. It's get up in the morning, go to the studio, work all day, go home, eat, sleep, repeat, and it's for 5 years. It's a massive sacrifice, and you got to be sure you want to do it. Yeah.
Was the challenge for you, Nick, like having done Curse of the Were Rabbit versus this film? Are all these films kind of the same to you in terms of the challenge level, or do you find like some films are more difficult than the other ones?
Yeah, I mean, they're all difficult, really. It's just what level of difficult. Yeah. In some ways, I don't know why exactly. Well, I do know some of the reasons, but this one ended up being slightly easier. Maybe because it was Merlin.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, it was really good fun, wasn't it?
yeah,
I think
it was, but it was all wet. I think it's partly because of lockdown, because we were waiting for Chicken Run 2 to finish, and we were like the train waiting to come in onto the platform, and it gave us a lot of time up front to develop, more time than we normally get. So we were a long time storyboarding and doing the real, the animatic.
like we actually knew what Act 3 was gonna be, didn't we?
Yeah,
By the time we
it
started shooting.
pretty much planned when we went onto the floor. There was a lot that needed still tinkering with, and Mark Burton, the screenwriter, was heavily involved, and you know, we we were a lot. One of the issues were more structural, weren't they? Really, we had a lot of the ideas were there, and right, like say Act Three, but one big issue was n- once we'd once it changed, Feathers McGraw had appeared, and it moved from a kind of with the gnomes, it was like Westworld with gnomes, sort of thing, the Yul Brynner Westworld with gnomes, and it moved into more Cape Fear with chickens, with or Cape Fear with a penguin. Um, and that but still there was a lot to work out where to whether to have that cold opening with feathers, or so at one point we had him only appearing halfway through the story. So it was more about Wallace and Gromit and the gnomes, and then feathers made. But it was just it is finding the movie takes quite a while, and when it became a revenge movie and with the right title, then it all seemed to come together properly, didn't it?
Did the title of that shot where he says "Vengeance most foul" is that did the title come early on, or was that something that was you figured out? That was a line that he said, and you said that's a good title.
No, the
It was fairly
it
late.
was fairly late on, and we
Yes.
put that line in after we'd decided on the title.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was gonna be something as if Wallace had said it, like
Uh,
because he messes up the way things are said. And we were gonna call it "Revengeance Most Foul," but when you wrote it down, it just looked like none of us could spell.
no,
So
no,
we got a the marketing team were like, it's not gonna work." So
really good.
the
Yeah. It was called A Tall Tale when it was just about gnomes, and and then when Feathers came in, we suddenly realised this is a revenge movie. It's Cape Fear, yeah. Mm, yeah.
Talk a little bit about the puppets. How have the puppets evolved technically since the earlier film? Like, have they changed? Like, I know there's now silicon for the bodies, but how have the puppets evolved over time?
I guess, well, there's two sides of it. There's the technical side of the materials, but there's also the way they look. And so if you look at the canon of Wallace and Gromit, starting with um, Grand Day Out, where, you know, Nick was learning how they needed to look, and even within that film, they change and evolve. And then, yeah, Close Shave, Wrong Trousers, and Match for Life, Death, and Were Rabbit, they're all slightly different. And then on F- A Matter of Life and Death, we pushed Wallace in particular, kind of his brow went mad and his mouth went super wide. And we actually on this film decided to bring the look of them back to more of a Were Rabbit era design. Um, and so each film we do take the opportunity just to or just to check in and take the opportunity to tweak or refresh. But there's all sorts of material technologies, I mean, that have advanced. So we still use modeling clay for the head and the hands, any area that's going to need to perform. Um,
More expressive.
More expressive, yeah. But really, silicone has allowed us to speed up the animation, and we can now get the texture looking right and have it durable enough and to move in the way we want. And before, you could have one or the other, but not all of them. And even just making the silicone look matte is a real challenge. Um, and our model making department found a way to do that. And so these ones are mostly silicone here. Feathers is clay. Wallace has his clay head, but for traveling, he's got silicone hands. But we wouldn't always use the silicone either. It's good up to a point, but there are some shots where you just have to go back to it being clay.
Especially if like Gromit jumped through the air and his body had to distort,
Yeah.
then the silicon just doesn't do it. So we'd go back to clay. Yeah.
Um, Sorry about that. On this film, you reunited with Alex Redette, who was the director of photography on The Wrong Trousers. Can you
Dave Alex with that.
Dave Alex Redette? I'm sorry, and then can you talk a little bit about reuniting with him, and what maybe challenges were on this film for shooting it that maybe didn't exist during the time of Wrong Trousers, or vice versa? How it's gotten easier to work with the director of photography.
Yeah, Dave. I think Dave has been on every single film I've worked on actually. Going right back to Grand Day Out, he helped out a little, and on Creature Comforts as well. He was lighting camera guy on that. Um, and on the feature films, Chicken Run, he worked along. There were two DPs. There was Dave Alex and Tristan Oliver. And Tristan has now gone on to work with Wes Anderson and do a few films there. But yeah, I guess the lighting has always been very much a part. The atmosphere, the character of the films, and playing a big part. And part of the beauty of working with stop motion is the way that you can light it in a 3D kind of way, and create all kind of atmosphere and depth, and with camera moves and
Mm.
what have you.
Or treat it very cinematically. I guess one of the largest
That's right. Yeah.
things that has changed is the introduction of LED lighting, which means that you can actually get practical lights into set in a way that we would have really challenged us previously. In sort of on even up to A Matter of Loaf and Death, so in the early 2000s, we'd still be using, you remember mag lights, the torch, the flashlights, we'd be using the bulbs from those run through a transformer, and well, they'd blow up for a pastime, but they were about the smallest, brightest bulbs that you could use. Now the LED, the tiny bulbs, you can build them into things in a way that is kind of unimaginable even only a few years ago. And even though LED lighting technology has been around for stop motion, it's only recently been actually useful, because they would change. You can't really tell from the human eye, but they would change color, they would flicker, they would cause all sorts of trouble. So people going, LED lighting, it's the way forward, and we were like, yeah, not so much. But now actually it's controllable in a way that is useful to us, and
And with digital cameras
with
as
the
well,
digital cameras, yeah.
sensitive.
And and you don't cook the animators with 10K lights like we had to previously, and so it kind of makes a more pleasant working environment as well.
I want to close off with just talking a little bit about the themes of the film and just this kind of technology. That this I'm curious what because when you were making this film, I'm sure when you came up with the idea for it, AI wasn't as big of a discussion topic. Yet your film is brilliantly kind of addresses that anxiety that a lot of us are feeling about technology replacing, things that we do and that we enjoy doing as human beings, which I think is Gromit represents, us, But I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what technologies scare you right now and what technologies maybe were you referring to when you were coming up with the idea for the film? Like where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I
Well,
I know,
yeah,
yeah, sorry.
go ahead.
I know at the beginning, I pitched the basic idea to Mark Burton, the screenwriter, and he was very lit up by the idea. More, I mean, AI was talked about, but it's more the general kind of tech in this kind of love affair with technology that we have in our society. That um, do we trust the tech that rules our lives? And but also a second question, I guess, that applies to feathers is do we do we trust those who control the tech that we put our trust in, sort of
Mm.
thing.
And it's not an anti-technology position either. We love tech as much as the next person, but it's about that balance, and it's about making sure that there's a human touch. There's the human element. Don't forget that because that's really important. Um, and he says as he reaches for his smartphone in his pocket, it's a,
Mm.
um, but in a very Wallace and Gromit, soft Wallace and Gromit way.
We try not to be too black and white about it because we realize that the AI already has many very useful roles in society.
Yeah, and you're right. When we were starting
It's
this,
just to keep ourselves in check, really.
that's right.
How much is it diminishing, or how much is it adding to our human relationships and or experiences, and how much is it taking away, and just keeping things in check, really.
Yeah. And AI AI was on the radar when we were sort of this film was in its infancy, but the speed at which technology goes like ramped right past us. So when the film came out, we'd already had all the writers' strikes and all of the issues that have come about from the rapid evolution of artificial intelligence in the creative industries, and so it is a massively hot topic. Um,
It feels very relevant. When you
yeah,
watch it right
yeah.
now, you're like, it speaks to so many issues that we're thinking about every day in our own lives. And it's just, but that's the, sign of good art is that there's relevance to it, just in the broader themes. And you're right that Wallace is still pro tech at the end of the film. He's like, look, the robots, saved you, Gromit. So
Yeah, but in fact, both Wallace and Gromit in this film, for the first time, both have an arc. It's usually just Gromit who learns something more about how you can't control someone. You can't make someone the way you want them to be. But Wallace also has an arc where I guess, because there's an existential issue of because Gromit, Wallace's main obsession is now really getting to Gromit, and so in order for them to stay together, there needs to be some give with Wallace, and he needs to realize that he's actually hurting Gromit unaware, sort of thing. So he had to have that little arc. Yeah.
A rare moment of emotional clarity on Wallace's part.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's normally the joke, is that he doesn't learn anything. But yeah.
well, Nick, Merlin, thank you so much. Everyone, if we can give a big round of applause for them. It's a
Thank you.
Thank you.
really wonderful film that continues the legacy of these characters, and I hope we see many more of these throughout the years. So yeah,
So, yeah. Thank you.
thank you, everybody.